Better business internet is here. Blackfoot Communications delivers unrivaled reliability and dedicated bandwidth for businesses. And our fiber-based network is ready to meet your needs. Contact us today and ask about a free fiber build and new competitive pricing. Call 406-556-1700 or visit goblackfoot.com/connect. Connect to more with Blackfoot Communications.
All right, appreciate you all joining us here. Yesterday was a great day for us to get back on the field and allow Bobcat football to take a step forward. We had a tremendous energy like we should. The guys were really excited to be out there, and I know our effort, enthusiasm, all those things was exactly what you'd expect on a first day and then some. On the flip side, our execution is going to take some work, and that's why you practice. That's why we've chose this format of alternating days between practice and meetings, so we can take today and go in a meeting room and watch all that film and learn from it. Because we feel like, at the end of the day, the guys learn by doing, and then they learn by replicating that over and over again. So, that's our goal day in and day out. But it was a great start. Excited to be out there, and Bobcat football is off and running. So I'll open up to questions.
All right, Coach. Well, thank you for taking the time. How did it feel for you to walk into Bobcat Stadium yesterday and be a head coach of your first spring practice?
It was certainly different. You're used to focusing on either your side of the ball or your position. So to have a broader perspective was different, but I certainly enjoyed it. I spent a lot of time observing our players, certainly, but then our coaches as well, and their efforts, their knowledge, ensuring that with their guys, and their enthusiasm was what we're looking for. So, first of many days, obviously, but it was about probably what I expected, but it was certainly different.
Which position group brought the most energy, brought the most juice to the first practice?
Boy, you're putting me on the spot there. You know what? I'd be remiss to point out any one position. That's where I felt like everybody did go out there. Now, I think naturally there was some big plays made by receivers. They're the ones that maybe got the most excited or hyped or whatever. So I maybe give them credit for that, but really pleased across the board.
I'll ask you at the end of the spring season. You'll have a better idea. And then last question, Lewis Kidd, we just spoke with him, has been such a tremendous leader for this program in his 4/5 years. What has his leadership meant to you, and how would you describe him as a player on the team?
Well, first off, as a leader and getting to know those captains in particular first, I think great perspective of not only his time here in Lewis's case, but what he and that whole group wants out of this final season. And I know Lewis has goals and desires beyond Montana State, but I think for him making the most of this last year is what he's really focused on. And very thoughtful though. This place matters a lot to him, and this program matters a lot, and that's apparent in the way he can articulate his thoughts and really be a shining example, not only in that offensive line group, but across the team.
Thanks, Coach.
Yep.
I'll hop in here next. So, you talk about Lewis. I'm curious if you can kind of give an overview of the offensive line group as a whole, and because obviously there's so many returners there for you guys.
Yeah, I do think offensively that's our strength, certainly in experience, but I think also the quality of those players. And just one day on the field and you just have helmets on, it's hard to maybe see the physical side of things, but I think it's apparent we have an intelligent group, a group that can communicate, and I think an athletic group too, and that's what shows up more on a day like yesterday than ultimately when we get pads on and ultimately when we get into games. But I do think it's a group that we can lean on. And honestly, I think, in this offense, that's where it starts. You can you can mask things up some different ways, but if you're good up front, you got a chance to be real good across the board.
And your quarterbacks too, I know you talked a little bit about them earlier this week, but obviously you have someone who have worked with some pretty good quarterbacks in your career. So what do you see in those guys, and what do you see as the potential for whoever ends up being the starter there?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I'll probably have a better answer for that in a few weeks. But I do think it's an eager group. My office is right next to Coach Housewright's, and the amount of time those guys have come in to ask questions, inquire, and watch film throughout our time here, I think has been tremendous, in an extension of the time that Coach Housewright's been able to spend with them. So I think it's an eager group. I think it's an intelligent group. And there's a wide variety of skills there, I think, amongst the five guys right now. So, ultimately, it comes down to, who's going to put us in best position to win football games. And then what can we do to really highlight what that person does best? So that's two-pronged there. And sometimes that's maybe chicken for the egg a little bit, but ultimately we gotta forecast a little bit there. We got to put those guys in as many 11-on-11 situations as we can through the course of spring when we're playing real football. Some guys can look really good in 7-on-7 or throwing routes on air or one-on-ones, but ultimately who can perform when it's 11-on-11. And today or yesterday was it was one day in that the progress of figuring that out. But I think we gleaned some things from yesterday, and we'll keep moving forward. But obviously very important for us to play well at that position, and we're going to keep working towards that.
And, because you mentioned that they all do bring different skill sets, and that's certainly true. I'm curious, you maybe think of, when you think of a quarterback, do you think of one or any of those guys or a particular skill set, or do you just try to find the best guy and try to kind of build an offense around what they can do best?
I think the latter. I think if you try to force feed it, that's, if you had five guys that look the same, I think you could do it that way. But I think in our situation, who can be the most productive? And production comes in different forms. Production certainly can come through throwing the football. It can come through decision-making. It can come through leadership. It can come through one's ability to run the football as well, and then there's more things beyond that. But, who's going to give us the best chance to win football games is something I'll repeat again, but that's relative. It's, there's a lot of things that go into it. And then once we make that decision, then kind of craft the offense to that kid's, that player's strengths. It's a process. I don't think, come Sunday, we're not going to have the quarterback position figured out, after 3 practices. I think it's going to be a deal where we go through the spring, and I certainly hope at the end of the spring we have a good sense, but it's going to take, I think, all of that to sort this out.
And lastly, for me, I'm curious what the chemistry has been like for your coaching staff, because, you knew some of the, your coordinators that you brought in, and obviously there was a bunch of guys who knew each other previously. So I'm curious how that went about trying to integrate everyone into now one staff.
Well, I've been really pleased with it. I think a couple things come into play there. I felt like the guys that we chose to retain were all good men, that were all invested in this program, I could sense that, these players in allowing them to move forward is really important to all of them. So, while change is difficult, I could sense that all those guys were going to be adaptable to change. And then the guys that I did bring in particular, the 2 coordinators, what they have to be able to do in those rooms is lead, and they have to be able to be flexible at the same time. They have to be able to communicate their thoughts, but then take suggestions. Neither the offensive side, the defensive side, or even from my perspective, can it be a one-way street. We have to be able to communicate. And I think that's what we've been able to do over the course of the last, we're pushing over 6 weeks now, is bring all that together. And, I think everybody has to respect each other. Everybody doesn't always have to think the same way. We got to be able to articulate our thoughts and then, run with decisions. And I've really been pleased with everybody buying in, while I think feeling like, okay, I got to say in this thing as well. And that's what we need to continue to build upon. But, I think we're moving in the right direction as far as our staff, continuity, chemistry, all those type of things.
Better Business Internet is here. Blackfoot Communications delivers unrivaled reliability and dedicated bandwidth for businesses. And our fiber-based network is ready to meet your needs. Contact us today and ask about a free fiber build and new competitive pricing. Call 406-556-1700 or visit goblackfoot.com/connect. Connect to more with Blackfoot Communications.
Sorry I missed you the other day. I was just getting back from Indianapolis, but appreciate you taking a minute. First of all, I want to ask you, at your previous stops, spring ball is a big deal in Montana. Not only spring ball is a big deal in Montana, not only because it's the break of spring and it kind of gives people optimism about the nice weather coming, but people just love, following the teams, tracking the position battles, all that stuff. Has it been a big deal at Wyoming and North Dakota State in your previous stops as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I've been fortunate to now be at a third place where football is a priority. And with that, spring football is. I think we've always taken the approach as far as the two kinds of staffs I've been a part of, I guess, between Coach Bowl and Coach Babich, where there is a real emphasis on the spring from a developmental perspective. You really need to take that time to find out who you are as a team, who your individuals are within the team. And then, hey, what do we do well? What do we need to improve upon? And that's the approach we're taking. And it's exciting. As much interest as there's been, in our spring football coming up. And I know that's that spring game down the road, excited about the opportunity to showcase what we have going on at that point, to people from across our state. And, I think, you get a sense that, hey, football matters here, and much like my opportunities both at Wyoming, North Dakota State, that's the way you want it.
You talk about your coordinators. When you have two relatively young coordinators and you're implementing relatively new schemes on both sides of the ball, how essential is this time, and what is the biggest challenges to sort of retooling both the offensive and defensive systems?
Well, this time's critical, and that's why we chose the method we did for this spring. Going to a regular normal spring and then extending it out over 5 weeks, because you need time, you need reps. Those reps need to be fed to players, but then they need to be able to learn from it in the film room. And you repeat that enough, you hope that by the end of the spring, you've made a pretty good dent to the players' understanding, but then also our coaches' understanding, what's going on. And I think for both young coordinators, I think to work out kinks as well. I think both guys are open-minded. I think they're learning about our players. It's not, hey, it's my way or the highway. And I think in both situations on either side of the ball, we got to go through spring and, learn what we can do best within those schemes and really put our players in best position to win football games in the fall.
In terms of the offensive line, so much of the success of an offensive line comes from continuity, chemistry. So obviously these guys probably have that since they've been together for a while. But what do you see as the next step for them, just in terms of maybe adjusting to those new schemes, or coming together as a unit, and just what is your thought just on the future for this offensive line?
Well, I think it's bright. I think the future's bright. Not only the guys that are returning, I think we got some good young players. So I think task number one is certainly solidifying that starting unit, and then beyond that, some other guys, hopefully like 2 or 3 that we feel comfortable playing in games. And then it's continuing to develop that depth. I think we have a chance to have a really deep unit, but that depth needs to be a mix of both young and old. And I think there's some young players that have a ways to go, but certainly have the ability that we're looking for. And, I'm anxious once we get the pads on to see how physical we can be. I think we've alluded to it. I know Coach Housewright did in his opening, press conference that, that needs to be our goal each Saturday, to be the more physical team. And that starts, to me, with your offensive line. It certainly carries over to the defensive side as well. But if your offensive line can be the more physical team on a weekly basis, you're going to be in position to be in games in the fourth quarter and ultimately wear teams down and win football games. And that's, I'm anxious to see kind of where we're at. I know what it looked like, back in 19, and I was pleased with what I saw, but we need to take a step forward there. And those guys are bigger and stronger and older and wiser, all that stuff. So, come Saturday when we put the pads on, that'll be the starting point to be able to evaluate that.
Last question for me. In terms of putting the pads on, Montana State has won with a physical brand of football for the last several years. And so not having played football for a while, how do you reignite that while still being careful? Because obviously you don't want to get guys hurt, but you obviously want to recapture that element of it. So how do you go about doing that these spring practices?
That's a great question. I've talked about it, just replicating competition while some of our competitors are, getting a chance to compete against each other. I think first thing is we need to be as physical as we can against each other while understanding we're all on the same team. I think that just comes with an understanding of, okay, what can we do in these non-padded days? I think that's a step in that direction. This does not need to be practices where guys are taking cheap shots, are doing things where guys are being put on the ground, anything like that. But we got to be able to push those limits. And you start with that from a non-padded perspective, then you take the pads and put them on Saturday. And we'll do that 12 times through the course of the spring. We'll be in full pads. And, I hate to say you push the envelope and you cross your fingers all at the same time, but that's part of it. But I think the biggest thing is continuing to reiterate to our guys that, hey, we're going to make each other better. The whole adage of the Proverbs that iron sharpens iron. I mean, there's truth to that. And we got to live by that. And the only way that we're going to get better is if we can go as hard as possible against each other and not have the injuries that could mount if you were not smart about it at the same time. So we've got to walk that line. And, I think the biggest thing is just we have a mature group, but like you mentioned, a group that hasn't had a lot of physical play in the last 16 months. So, we're gonna do what we can to push that envelope. And even if that's, pressing younger players a little bit more than some of the older guys, we will have to, have the right formula on every given day we go out there.